most financial advisors, and there's no right or wrong answer here, but they just have a sense of, wanting to belong to a community and, accomplish some of the things that we've been talking about. They want financial advisors to be able to share ideas with. They don't want to feel like they're part, of a humongous organization. And if you have the ability to, have your cake and eat it too.
On the independent side, we've seen the shift over the last few years of advisors thinking, I'm just going to go RIA. I'm going to get out from underneath this FINRA burdenship of regulations, and I'm going to set up an RIA. And this is going to be great. I'm going to keep all the revenue. I won't have these burdensome compliance issues, and this is going to be great. Well, I don't really think that it has become played out exactly that way.
I think that's one of the best parts of independence. I just helped another advisor that had to move really quickly from his firm.
That by the time an advisor gets to a transition, they're tired, they're exhausted, and they're unprepared for, in so many areas, for what is really going to be involved. And it's also a very emotional and vulnerable time, especially if you're coming from that employee channel or you've been at one firm for 20 years. Suddenly there's...
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. When advisors explore almost the infinite amount of options out there are in the independent space, it becomes overwhelming pretty quickly. A big fear, especially for employee advisors, but employee advisors in general, is if I make a move to another independent firm or I make a move to an independent firm, I don't want to be left on an island. Sometimes after exploring various broker-dealer independent options, a lot of advisors are still in search of something more, whether it's a stronger community, aka not feeling like a rep number, or looking for more enhanced tools or resources, or even just more hands-on service experience. The OSJ partnership, basically affiliating with a smaller network of advisors within a larger independent broker dealer, could potentially be the way to go if you're looking for those types of things. I have Rita Robbins here today. She's the CEO of Affiliated Advisors, and she runs one of the most successful OSJs in the industry, partnering with one of the largest independent broker dealers, OSJ, formerly known as Advisor Group. And today with Rita, we're just going to cover why potentially affiliating with an OSJ makes sense, how their value proposition could add an additional layer of support on top of the base broker-dealer offering, and just listening to her amazing growth story of Affiliated Advisors. Rita, I really appreciate you hopping on today.
Oh, Corey, this is such a pleasure. And I'm so glad that, our conversations will be public, because I think that our exchange of ideas and information has been invaluable to me. So
I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much. So Rita, I know you're an industry veteran. I know you started out and you kind of have a unique starting off point of your career that's, evolved into an industry leading OSJ. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your story?
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying that March of this year, it was the 30th anniversary of my founding Affiliated Advisors.
Congrats.
So thank you. It also marked the 20th year of my affiliation with OSJ, formerly Royal Alliance, part of Advisor Group. So obviously longevity and making the right decisions, can serve you long-term growth very well, which is why I think it's absolutely essential, by the way, that people work with you and your firm, because it is a complex, overwhelming, confusing, very, very ultimately incredibly important decision about advisors and their career path and their growth trajectory. So I actually started off in a wirehouse in the back office, and I really wanted to be a broker. Unfortunately, at the time, there was like a one woman per branch rule. So we already had a woman. And so through my back office functionality at a major wirehouse, I was connected to Jay Lewis, who started the first independent broker dealer for advisors. And that was back in 91. And by in 81. And by 83, I was approached by a major asset management firm who had only been distributing their mutual funds through wirehouses and regional firms, but they knew that there was something changing. There were a few independent broker dealers, the insurance companies were launching broker dealers, banks were starting to get into the idea and concept of offering, investment services to their clients. So I went to work for an investment management firm to help open up that space for them, the non-traditional distribution. And that was in 1983. And at the time, I was one of 5 women in the entire mutual fund industry
Wow.
who was a wholesaler. And I loved it. I just loved it, Corey. I love spending my day with advisors. I learned a lot. I really became acutely aware of the traits, the habits, the approach, the headset that successful advisors used. And 10 years later, in 1993, I gave birth to a daughter. And about a year later, I was having real challenges balancing the constant travel with having a baby at home. And so I set out with literally a borrowed desk, a Rolodex, for those of you not familiar with it, like literally we used to have like little cards on a spinny round wheel. And I tried to take advantage of my 2 assets, which was the advisors that I knew through the last decade of wholesaling and what I had learned in my time, really the most important assets we all have.
That's awesome. And we came from that same asset management firm together, I think. I worked at Lord Abbett as a wholesaler for a while too in Jersey City. So I love that. Being a wholesaler prior to this, I feel like that is a really unique perspective because you get the ability to sit in front of so many financial advisors and learn what works, learn what doesn't, learn what their hot buttons are, learn what they're really, really looking for. And I mean, it's just such a valuable asset, I think, to have just thousands of meetings with different types of financial advisors
Yeah.
and learn how they're growing in different ways. So I'm sure that's
You know,
part of a reason why you've had the success you have.
Not only are those factors important, but it also made me very aware of the missteps, the mistakes, the things that didn't work, what to be avoided. And sometimes avoiding mistakes, even though I try to look at them all as learning opportunities, I think that was really insightful as well. So you're right, that huge range of exposure and knowledge, it was just an amazing learning curve. And I think knowledge that I've taken forward with me and share with my team on a regular basis. It's incredibly practical, useful database.
That's great. So for the listeners on this podcast that might just be starting to lift up their head in terms of what else is out there, especially advisors that are at an employee firm that are making a
Mhm.
move to an independent firm. I feel like most independent advisors at least know what an OSJ is, but can you kind of go through like what the role of an OSJ is and how it could potentially help an advisor?
Yeah, I'd love to. So first, I do think that I wish we could come up with a better name than OSJ. I mean, that harks back to when the major functionality that a team like mine provided was a compliance functionality, right? Office of Supervisory Jurisdiction. So, Corey, we need to think about a better way to describe what we do.
Hmm.
Really, I think about what my team and I bring to the advisors that we work with, and it is such a wide spectrum. So not only are we doing things that I would think of as table stakes, we're providing a community and a really important community because this is really sometimes a really lonely job, even though we're talking to people all day long. So we not only bring, I think, the sense of community among like-minded advisors, but we bring, I think, an array of services, experience, knowledge, and practicality that an advisor just can't get on their own. I mean, we work with, I think, a really fabulous firm that has a huge amount of resources. So, I think about an advisor going out there on their own, especially the advisors who are making a transition from an employee model, for instance, for you to be able to really fully take advantage of the resources of any firm would be really challenging to navigate on your own. I'll give you an example. Which training program is right for you? How does the technology that they're providing really get utilized, adaptive, and add to your profitability. What does the growth rate look like on advisors working with an OSJ versus not? And to that point, I will tell you that year over year, a third of our advisors grew at over 15% last year, and half of those grew at over 40. So I think the kind of resources and expertise and knowledge we bring, whether it's the community, learning from us as well as our peers. We have a huge array of outside consultants that we vetted and work with. So whether it's media relations, marketing, what's your brand? What's your logo? How are you going to communicate this? How do you set yourself apart in this competitive landscape? How do you get over that hurdle of going from perhaps a brand name recognition factor that employee advisors think is so important, to truly understand that the value that you're bringing to your clients is really about you, that relationship, that trust, that confidence they've developed. So these are just a few examples, along with things like inorganic growth. How would you get out there and navigate a crowded, really jargon-filled, challenging landscape to find a firm that you might want to acquire, or succession planning, continuity planning. Where are you going to go for a specific subject matter expert? So I think these are just a few of the things that we bring, along with, really practical things. You're coming out of an employee model. What is your business structure going to look like? What are the tax implications? What kind of tech stack do you need? So it's a wide array of expertise, huge depth of knowledge. In fact, we have a 10-person team, and 7 of the people on our team have at least a decade of experience. Some, like myself, and some others, it's multiple decades. And I think, as we spoke earlier, that's really hard to be able to have that broad reach and that real depth that can really make a meaningful impact on an advisor's trajectory, their growth, and how they structure their practice.
Yeah, that's a great overview. I think a misconception when I talk with financial advisors, maybe they're part of a firm where um, either someone else has been controlling their destiny, or they've just had a lot of frustrations and friction because there's too much bureaucracy or local politics inside of their office. They tell me, they say, Corey, I don't want any other layers between me and the broker dealer directly. And that's very not the case with an OSJ. I try to tell financial advisors that all the things you just mentioned, those are add-ons on top of all the great tools and resources that the broker dealer you're planning on affiliating are with. And, a firm like Affiliated Advisors or another great OSJ is just very much an enhancement to help things run a little bit more smoothly. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely accurate about this. I think about an advisor, whether they're coming from another independent space or an employee model, trying to navigate, the enormous array of resources just offered at, like, Osaic, for instance, and other firms. It would be just mind-boggling. It would take a really long time for you to familiarize yourself with exactly what's available, what would most specifically fit your needs, what are the resources that you can utilize. Just technology platforms, which become so integrated into everything we're doing. I joke around, but it's a great example that, I have a phone, which is really a computer. Am I using everything that Apple provides? I'm probably using 15 to 20% of it. Is there another 15 or 20% that could really help me? Most likely, but I don't have anybody sitting down other than my adult children when they roll their eyes to say, oh, mom, it could be doing this for you. So I think it's really, I'd like the advisor, and our goal at Affiliated Advisors is to help the advisor focus on what's best for them in building the practice of their dream. And if you're going to be navigating, an immense, extensive, resource-filled landscape on your own, how much time do you have to A, do that, and B, what are you going to give up? Does that mean you're going to spend less time with your clients? Is that going to mean that your marketing and client communications are going to suffer? Are you going to have to add overhead in terms of additional team members or support team to help you navigate all that. So I think that it's not just the practicality of, how do I best utilize, for instance, technology and the resources of a firm like OSJ, but more importantly, like, how do we keep you focused on driving your business forward, increasing your profitability, and having, maybe, I find this, we recently had an advisor join us, and literally one day a week was spent on administrative tasks,
Yeah.
like 20% of his time, where he wasn't with his family, or he wasn't playing golf, he wasn't prospecting, he wasn't meeting with new clients. So we also want to be really aware that we can make advisors' time and their use of time and how they use it much more productive.
Yeah, I mean, especially in some of the larger firms, there's immense benefits in having scale through pricing
Mhm.
and tools and resources. No doubt about it. Stability inside of the broker dealer itself in this crazy environment that we're in right now. Um, but sometimes I get feedback from financial advisors. There's Corey, I feel like I'm lost in the shuffle a little bit. Like I don't know how to navigate this really, really
Right,
large
right,
firm, and why not align yourself, with someone that's been learning how to navigate it for, 20 plus years.
right,
Um,
right.
especially if they're not taking a humongous amount of, your revenue to be able to do this. Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? That's exactly our feeling. In fact, as an example, and on our team, we not only have, we'll talk a little bit more about this, I think, as we talk about maybe the differentiation between different types of OSJ and what they bring to the table and how they can help advisors, navigate to building the practice of their dreams. But, most of our advisors have very little, day-to-day sort of interaction on the support, administration, compliance side, even technology with OSAC. So our team, we know their practices. We're the first call they make, whether it's an operations issue, a question, a navigation issue. How do I find services for my ultra high net worth clients? Who on your team or Osaic's team can help me with, fill in the blank. So, we know their practices intimately and in a way that a broker dealer scale, which you want, right? You want that more efficient pricing. You want the profitability of being, affiliated with a firm that can have enterprise-wide pricing with clearing firms and outside vendors. But you also don't want to call up and have the first thing someone asks you is like, "What's your rep code?" I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
that intimacy is not only lost, but we think it's inherently important moving forward to have some people behind you who know what your goals are and how what you want to do. And we can certainly help you get there.
I mean, another thing that I've seen, I'd say we did a look back study over the last 5 years inside of Bridgemark Strategies in terms of where financial advisors actually went inside of the
Mhm.
independent broker dealer
Right.
space. And 60+% of financial advisors, whether coming from another independent firm or coming
Mhm.
from an employee firm, 60% of those chose to join some sort of larger community inside of a broker dealer. I just feel like most financial advisors, and there's no right or wrong answer here, but they just have a sense of wanting to belong to a community and accomplish some of the things that we've been talking about. They want financial advisors to
They
be able to
do.
share ideas with. They don't want to feel like they're part of a humongous organization. And if you have the ability to have your cake and eat it too, I mean, it makes a lot of
Why
sense.
not? Why not? I completely agree. I'll tell you where we've seen a dramatic shift, and I think this was totally driven by the pandemic. So first, I just want to tell you that, we have advisors all over the country. We currently work with about 100 advisors, 60 support personnel. And while we do a lot of work with, we call them solopreneurs, We also have large ensembles and teams. And we have found that where the biggest shift has occurred has been in the employee channel. So many advisors in, those channels were totally unprepared to be able to work remotely. Their firms were not set up for that. That wasn't the business model. The technology didn't support it. But they realized pretty quickly that, once things, became a little more aligned for them in terms of at least being able to access, working remotely, which was a big challenge at the beginning for so many of them. But, that intimacy of Zooming with clients, which was taking place from their homes, right? It could have been their dining rooms, maybe a home office, but they realized that there's an intimacy they had in working from home and Zooming with their clients instead of having them come into offices that made it easier. It was much more confident and trust building. They were able to, for instance, tap into the adult children in a way where they weren't waiting for the kids to come in to visit their parents from out of town. And it also made them stop to realize, like, I'm getting maybe a third of the revenue that I'm generating for what now had seemed like, overhead that they really weren't benefiting from. So we've really seen a lot of our advisors coming from that space where they're like, you know what, I can work from home. If I need a conference room, there are plenty of facilities. There's an absolute glut of, inexpensive commercial space on the market, no matter where you're located. And now I have that freedom and flexibility to really hone in authentically on the type of client I work best with. Regardless of asset size, I no longer have to worry about hitting bogeys to, that constant changing compensation that went on. And so it has really been eye-opening for so many of these advisors to recognize that there was more out there that could better suit their needs. And about 12 years ago, we started a firm called Freedom Capital Management, which we're now expanding from New Jersey into other areas. And it's, a plug and play. An advisor has everything they need. They don't worry about their tech stack, their marketing, they're generating a brand awareness. And so there's so much flexibility. And it's really been inspiring to me to see how advisors at their core are starting to truly recognize it's me and not that brand name, that firm name with the reputational risks on the door and on my, that's also dictating, how I hold myself out to the public, what my social media looks like. Build your own brand identity and own it. Like literally, you get the equity in what you've built.
Yeah, that's great. It's awesome. You have so many different silos of opportunities for advisors, whether they want to, do their own brand or plug into something,
Right.
more easy so they can just focus on bringing over their clients. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So one other thing I wanted to mention is that we recently realized that there's I call it the muddy middle, which I can't take credit for that. I loved it and that phrase. But so much on the independent side, we've seen the shift over the last few years of advisors thinking, I'm just going to go RIA. I'm going to get out from underneath this FINRA burdenship of regulations, and I'm going to set up an RIA. And this is going to be great. I'm going to keep all the revenue. I won't have these burdensome compliance issues, and this is going to be great. Well, I don't really think that it has become played out exactly that way. I think that a lot of advisors, and I would say I call that muddy middle, like there are advisors out there with $100 million under management who set up RIAs. I can't imagine how this has been profitable. First of all, the expenses are really just skyrocket when you go to when you become an independent RIA. You're now responsible for everything from compliance and ADV filings, obviously just putting together a tech stack, generating statements, assuring the quality of the data that's going in. There's a whole host of things, like infrastructure, technology, that have escalated costs. And the bottom line is that I think a lot of independent RIAs are finding like, we really hadn't gotten out from underneath the regulatory burdens. And, the point is that in the last 12 months, there have been 106 regulations that the SEC has passed. And some of the most burdensome ones are from the SEC, in fact, and not FINRA. So whether it's Reg BI or the Department of Labor fiduciary standards that will go into place, maybe sometime this fall, these just add to the complexity, the cost, and we find that a lot of advisors in that money metal, have to realize that their expenses have gone up, which means the value of their firm has been driven down, and they're no longer as client-centric as they wanted to be. And so one of the rules that I think people thought was going to be great was, I can use endorsements as an example. Well, I don't know how many people are reading endorsements and thinking this is the advisor I want to work with. It's not like you're in Amazon analyzing which faucets, right? I mean, so we find that that it has not turned out both from an economic growth and a practice focus to be what people thought. So we now offer an affiliation model with that allows for advisors who have gone that independent route, don't have FINRA licenses any longer, to have all the benefits, scale, pricing, technology, expertise, and resources between affiliated advisors and Osaic that I think will serve them much better and add to their profitability and relieve some of their financial and time burdens.
I agree 100%. I think there are certain asset under management thresholds that make sense more than another to open up your own RIA. And I think that's a great solution. But I think a big mistake a lot of financial advisors make, I literally had one yesterday with an advisor that is just so fed up with the bureaucracy inside of his firm, friction from a compliance standpoint, not being able to control his brand. And he was just so unhappy. He was convinced that the only way that he can have his freedom and fulfillment in what he did was opening up his own RIA. And just by slowing him down and just helping understand what he wanted to accomplish, really the only things he wanted to accomplish was freedom and brand, freedom to invest the way that he wants to. He wasn't trying to do anything super out of the box. He just wanted to be left alone to do what he felt was right for his clients. And that could be accomplished in so many more places than just opening up your own RIA. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So I hope you were able to help this advisor see the light and the fact that there were additional options that are not as, just so burdensome and so challenging. I mean, I wish I could say to you like, wow, there's like one easy to use tech stack that, could be a solution for independent RIAs. But I think, we know that just navigating those challenges could be incredibly overwhelming.
Without a doubt. Make it your burden, Rita, not theirs. That's
exactly. That's a great way to put it.
So there's a lot of OSJs in there. I mean, even inside of Osaic, there's, multiple different options. There's hundreds of different options out there in the industry. I mean, obviously you're a very innovative OSJ. How does an advisor, when they're considering options, decide what is a good option versus one they should potentially steer clear from?
Great question. But I think some of this is very basic, but in some ways might not be where advisors are focused. And again, just to say this is exactly why working with an expert like you and the rest of the consultants at Bridgemark is so important. First of all, I mean, one of the very things that I really believe people should pay attention to is, when you speak with that OSJ, what is your intuition telling you about these people? How are they focused? Too often, and we have OSJs out there where we're working with advisors as a sideline, right? They could be large producers. They've been very successful. That doesn't always translate to success for someone working under them. So I would ask kind of questions that, might not be top of mind. Let's get away from the obvious things, payout and pricing and what a trade cost and platform fees. I might ask deeper questions than that. Let's start with this. Tell me about the last hires that you made on your team. This can tell you like, where is this OSJ focused? Do they really understand where advisors need help? Are
Mhm.
they responding to a changing environment? I mean, it's constantly changing. So who have your hires been? Tell me a little bit about your last two hires and the functionality and the benefits they're bringing to your advisors. I think the other thing they might ask about is like, what's the growth rate? Where's the proof of the success that you're bringing to advisors? I think another thing they might ask to do, and I really highly recommend this, is talk to advisors who are working with that OSJ, right? Like, what has their experience been? Because
Mhm.
it starts at the very beginning. And, I know we'll probably speak about this a little more in depth, but, how many advisors have joined your OSJ? What's your transition process look like? What kind of ongoing support can I expect? And basically, the sense of community is really important, but so is the culture.
Mhm.
How like-minded are these advisors going to be? What's the values of that OSJ, and how do they play out in supporting advisors on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see there's a lot of different, business models out there, but there's some that are just clearly, aggregating assets under management to, maximize payout for, their
Right,
advisors and
right.
for themselves that add very, very little. And then there's, others that just have a really deep bench of tools and resources as well, and are constantly reinvesting back into the firm as well. And then when you start digging into those stuff, you can see, clear as day, in my opinion, who the really good ones are and who aren't.
Yeah, another thing, we have a wide array of outside consultants that we work with. A wide array, because one of the things that we recognize early on is that, you know, we hire to fill specific functions that are core to supporting our advisors.
Mhm.
But what happens if you need a logo designer? What if you need to get deeper into media relations and public relations? What if you need a lawyer to, given you outside counsel perspective on a contract that you have? What's your liability? How can you work within following the rules, but yet, uh, ensure that you are going to be able to transition to another firm? So we have a wide array of just outside resources, and that in and of itself is huge. Whether you're looking to bring on additional teams, team members, and maybe ultimately advisors also have a different direction, and maybe they want to grow a larger team. And where are you going to go for inorganic growth, merger, succession planning opportunities? So I think they should probably think about what they want, 5 years down the road, which too many advisors just think about my immediate friction and not where do I ultimately want to go, and use that where I want to be in 5 years also as a starting place when you're talking to prospective OSJs. How will they align their resources with your success?
I love that. So when exploring these different opportunities, I say there's kind of like three different silos in terms of time with that OSJ where they can add a lot of value. We talked about, while they're there and growing their business. We just talked about, the end or kind of the sunset of their career, or how you could potentially help. But in my opinion, one of the largest impacts that an OSJ could have is when they're transitioning their business from point A to point B. Like, talk about an added level of backing and support. You have, the independent broker dealer helping you with their transitions team. And then you have your transitions team on top of that, just giving them even more support to get their business over as smoothly as possible. I know that's a really strong point inside of your OSJ. Do you just want to talk about, how you differentiate a little bit? And just before you answer, I think advisors, when they're going through this process, they're so tired by the end of this, by the end of the due diligence process and exploring like five different options. They get to the transitions portion and they're like, can you transition my business? Yes. Okay. And they just kind of move on. And transition support can really differentiate from one firm to a firm, and it's arguably the most important part of the process. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for highlighting this. I think you're right. I think that that complex due diligence process, which obviously you help to minimize and expedite and help them through to a final decision. I always say a bad transition is like a bad honeymoon. You just cannot recover from it.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and that only came to mind because my husband and I were recently in France and we stayed at the same hotel in Nice that we'd spent our honeymoon in 37 years ago. So that's sort of top of mind for me. But
Nice.
first of all, we've had 44 advisors join us in the last 4 years. And we do have not only resources, which I'll speak a little more to, at affiliated advisors, but we know that by the time an advisor gets to a transition, they're tired, they're exhausted, and they're unprepared for, in so many areas, for what is really going to be involved.
Mhm.
And it's also a very emotional and vulnerable time, especially if you're coming from that employee channel or you've been at one firm for 20 years. Suddenly wow, there's so much ahead of you. So I'll just tell you that Trisha Qualley, my partner Trisha, has transitioned well over 100 advisors. And we generally like to start. I mean, obviously, there are circumstances where we have to move much more quickly. And you and I were recently involved in a situation like that. But generally, we prefer at least a 6 to 8 week lead time. And we have an over 400-point checklist of what we need to help that advisor and how that advisor can help themselves prepare for this transition. And it's a very involved process, and it takes constant attention, time. But we never want an advisor to get to that point where they're making a transition and not feel prepared, ready, and assisted. So it's a long series of calls before and Zooms before and then ongoing. And we actually have an internal 3-phase transition process. And the first phase is obviously focused on the absolutely essential things, getting the advisor prepared and ready for the transition and all the pre-work that goes into that ahead of time. And then obviously working through the actual, and this might involve biweekly or 3-time-a-week meetings with us and the Osaic transition team. And then you get into that, as we go through that, then there's another phase, the training, the technology. Do you have admin staff? How do we get them up to speed as quickly as possible so they can help you? How do we let the advisor get back to that day-to-day business of taking care of his clients? And then we get into the third stage of transition, which is generally 6 to 9 months later, where we're starting to take a more strategic focus at that practice. And how do we make you more profitable? How do we put together workflows for you? What can we eliminate? How can we unburden you and allow you to now begin to focus on growing your practice, strengthening your brand, and making sure that, if you have admin assistants and a team, that they're really working at full capacity in a really efficient and effective way. So it's not just about moving those clients over. It's about taking a really broad-based look at, making it the most efficient possible in transferring assets, and then making sure that the training and the resources that we have really get fully utilized. And it works. We are averaging 93 to 94% of assets going with an advisor. And I will just put a little asterisk on that and tell you that I think a transition is a great time for an advisor to sit back and think about, who do I really want to work with? Which clients are sort of my target market? Who are my favorite clients? What's the commonality? And probably at that point in their growth, they can probably say, when I get back from lunch or on a Monday morning, who are the 5 clients that I don't really want to call back?
Yeah.
Who are the clients that, are not really working with me in the most effective manner? So we use this, ask advisors to think about, even focusing before that transition on their ideal clients and who they might actually want to leave behind.
I think that's one of the best parts of independence. I just helped another advisor that had to move really quickly from his firm. Had about 100 million in assets. And this was about a year ago. And we just checked up at his 1 year mark. I was just saying congrats for his anniversary. He brought 80% of his assets with him, not even being able to plan the transition. But he lost 100 households that were that other 20% of the assets. So he's making significantly more money than he ever was before. And he said he has 30% of his time back into his day, if not more, because those were the high maintenance clients that he didn't want to call back, and just has so much more time to do whatever he wants now, whether it's spend more time with his family or grow his
Right.
business, whatever he wants to do. So, right.
That's so true. As advisors' practices grow, they tend to not think about like where that segmentation of clients can have a real impact. And one of the things that we, work with, we have, obviously very, very successful advisors. And as you're saying, if you can eliminate 100 households, increase your profitability, pay more attention to the clients that are generating the revenue, deepen those relationships, increase your referral base. It seems like, almost like too good to be true. And one of the diagnostic tools that we work with our advisors on is like which households, which clients are really providing the bulk of your growth, the bulk of your revenues. And so what we found has really been very interesting is having advisors sell those slower segments to younger advisors within our group. And two things happen, and it is consistently proven. The large producer gets even larger and has more time and greater profitability. And those clients that are working with a younger advisor, they're also seeing a huge amount of growth because those are also most likely the clients who have not really had as deep a dive with the advisor. So for us, it's been a win-win to be able to help advisors truly segment and truly focus. And it's also, fabulous for a younger advisor to be able to work with clients that they're not out there prospecting for. So it's been a real win-win. And that's often overlooked, even though it would seem really obvious.
It's a rewarding job we have for sure. It's awesome.
For sure. It really is. It really is. I just wanted to mention also, I think I would love to mention this. If you go to affiliatedadvisors.com, you'll find a white paper that we actually won a Wealthy Award for last year on transitioning your business. So it goes into a lot greater depth of the kind of considerations, thought process, and things that an advisor could probably take a deeper dive looking at when they're considering a transition.
Perfect. I really appreciate the time today, Rita. I've had great experiences working with you, and I look forward to seeing what's next.
Oh, as do I. Thank you so much, Corey. I really appreciate your expertise and your time, and you've always been, thoughtful and very generous in helping me in so many ways. It's
Thank you so much.
appreciated.
I really appreciate the time, and I hope you have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Corey.
My pleasure.